This story is titled, My Grandparents Deceived Me About My Father's Inheritance, Forged Documents, and Left Me with Massive Debt. So I made them pay for everything. Subreddit. My name is Marcus, and I'm 29 years old. I work as a supply chain coordinator for a logistics firm, which means I'm constantly on the road. I'd estimate I'm traveling at least 75% of the year, living out of airports and hotels more than my own apartment back in Phoenix. It's a chaotic lifestyle, but honestly, I like it. The constant movement keeps me sharp and focused. The downside is that I don't see my family very often, but if I'm being completely honest, that's never really felt like much of a loss to me. I'm the oldest child in my family. My younger sister Sophia is 25, and according to my parents, she's basically the reincarnation of Van Gogh. This is despite the fact that her artistic portfolio mostly consists of drawings of plants with googly eyes and sad-looking girls with crystals drawn on their foreheads. She's been calling herself a professional artist ever since she managed to sell a $35 sketch at a farmer's market. And I'm not kidding about that price point. To give you an idea of how my family operates, I remember one time my mom actually started crying because Sophia drew a picture of a daisy and explained that it represented the burden of womanhood. Meanwhile, when I got promoted last year and was flown out to speak at a major logistics conference in Switzerland, something I was genuinely proud of, they completely forgot to call me. That pretty much sums up the family dynamic I've been dealing with my entire life. About 4 months ago, I was sitting in the Dallas airport during a layover when my phone rang. It was my dad, which immediately put me on edge because he never calls unless someone's dead or needs money. I answered expecting the worst, and his voice sounded different. Low and kind of shaky in a way I wasn't used to hearing. "Hey, we didn't want to worry you, but your mom's been going through some stuff," he said. "It's probably nothing, but she's been having these episodes. Fatigue, dizziness, numbness in her legs. We're doing tests, and the doctors think it might be neurological or autoimmune. We just don't know yet." I completely froze. "Why didn't you call me sooner?" I asked. He sighed heavily. "She didn't want to be a burden?" I asked if they had gotten any kind of diagnosis yet, and he told me no, but that the doctors were concerned enough to order more comprehensive testing. When I asked if they needed anything, financial help, someone to come home, whatever, he deflected in that typical way of his. "We're okay for now. It's just been really stressful." The next morning, I wired them $3,000. I told them to use it for whatever medical bills were coming their way, and he just texted back, "Got it, we'll keep you posted." Over the next few weeks, I started getting this steady drip feed of vague updates that never really told me anything concrete. Messages like, "Mom had a rough night," or "She's not eating much," or "She had another episode." Nothing specific, no doctor names, no hospital visits mentioned, just this constant stream of emotional debris that left me feeling helpless and worried. Then Sophia started posting these absolutely cringe-worthy Instagram stories featuring her and my mom. Each post had sad piano music playing in the background, accompanied by captions like, "The strongest woman I know," and "Cherish every second." The whole thing felt performative and over the top, but I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. Eventually, I couldn't stand the vague updates anymore, so I called Sophia directly. "What's actually going on?" I asked her straight up. She immediately launched into this dramatic monologue about how I wouldn't understand because I'm never around. She went on about how I haven't seen Mom limping around the house or sleeping for 18 hours straight. When I pressed her for specifics about what the doctors had actually said, she paused for a moment before responding. "They don't know," she said. "They're still testing, and it's been going on for 3 months now." I decided to let it go at that point. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe I was projecting my own issues onto the situation. When my dad mentioned that they might need to travel out of state to see a specialist and that it wouldn't be covered by insurance, I wired them another $3,500. I figured that if my mom was actually dying, I'd regret being stingy about money more than anything else. The week after I sent that second payment, I was in Portland finishing up a client presentation when I received a message that changed everything. It was from Linda, our old neighbor back home, a sweet lady who used to babysit Sophia and me when we were kids. Her message was simple and innocent. "Hey Marcus, just checking in. I saw your mom out walking the dog Wednesday morning and she looked great. Hope the worst is behind her." I had to read that message twice. Wednesday. That same Wednesday, my dad had texted me that Mom couldn't get out of bed again. I didn't respond to Linda right away because I was trying to process what I'd just read. I tried brushing it off, telling myself that maybe it was just a good day for Mom. Maybe she had forced herself to get up and move around. Maybe I was overthinking the whole situation. But then Tyler, my coworker, noticed something when we were having drinks at the hotel bar later that evening. I had mentioned the whole situation with my family and showed him the last Venmo receipt I'd gotten from my dad. Tyler squinted at the screen and said, "Why is this being sent to a personal username? If it's actually for a hospital or clinic, it should be going through their billing department. That just looks like a casual transfer between friends." Tyler used to work in medical billing before switching to tech, so he knew what he was talking about. He offered to take a quick look at the invoices I had saved on my phone, and within 6 minutes, he had spotted at least 3 major red flags. The formatting was inconsistent between different documents. One invoice listed a clinic that didn't actually exist, and another listed a consultation fee of $100 for a doctor who didn't show up in the state medical registries. I looked at him and asked the question I was afraid to voice. Is it possible they're faking all of this? Tyler gave me a look that said everything. "I've seen dumber scams," he said, "especially when they happen inside families." That night, I couldn't stop myself from scrolling through Sophia's Instagram feed with fresh eyes. Just 3 days earlier, she had posted a photo of herself with 2 girlfriends at some upscale rooftop wine bar. She was wearing what looked like a designer dress, had obviously gotten her hair done recently, and the caption read, "Manifest it, claim it, deserve it." The contrast between this image and the supposed family crisis was jarring. That's when I felt it hit me in the gut. That sickening realization you don't want to believe. The possibility that your own family might be lying to you, playing you, systematically using you for money. But I wasn't going to confront them based on screenshots and suspicions alone. If I was going to accuse them of fraud, of faking a medical crisis just to bleed me dry, I wasn't going in half prepared. I wanted concrete facts. So I made a decision that would change everything. I booked a flight home without telling anyone I was coming. I showed up on a Friday afternoon, didn't call, didn't text, just drove straight from the airport in a rental car. I pulled into the same driveway where I used to mow the lawn every Saturday for $12 and a "we're proud of you" that never actually came. My dad was in the front yard raking leaves when I arrived. The expression on his face when he saw me was pure panic, hastily disguised as fake cheer. "Marcus, what the hell? What a surprise," he stammered, clearly caught off guard. I played it cool. "Yeah, I figured I'd check in since Mom is, dying and all." He fumbled with the rake and started mumbling about how she had just gone to lie down because it was a rough morning. Right, just like all the other rough mornings she's apparently had right before her brunch dates and manicures, I thought to myself. I walked inside, and there she was. Not in bed. Not hooked up to any medical equipment. Not looking like someone battling a mysterious, debilitating illness. She was sitting on the couch in full makeup, casually scrolling through her phone like she was recovering from a spa treatment rather than fighting for her life. Her eyes went wide when she saw me. "Marcus, why didn't you tell us you were coming?" I looked her dead in the face. "I wanted to see for myself how you're holding up." She blinked rapidly. "Today's a good day." That's exactly what she said. Just like that. Like she hadn't spent the last 3 months allegedly battling some undiagnosable, debilitating illness that no doctor could explain but somehow still required thousands of dollars in testing and specialist consultations. I nodded and sat down, taking a moment to look around the house. It didn't look like the home of 2 people who were struggling financially or emotionally. There was a brand new coffee table, a new television, and sitting proudly in the kitchen was a gleaming new espresso machine. The same one Sophia had posted in her Instagram story 2 weeks ago, acting like it was hers. "Where's Sophia?" I asked. My mom waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, she's at her studio space. You know how busy she is with her work." "Yeah, busy. Busy drawing sad plants and telling people it's activism." We made small talk for about 25 minutes. Forced smiles, fake concern, the usual family theater. Then I excused myself to use the bathroom but made a detour to the old home office instead. The door was still unlocked, just like it had always been. I opened the top drawer of the desk and found a pile of unopened mail. Most of it was the usual junk, but a thick envelope from the county tax assessor's office caught my attention. I pulled it out and realized it was regarding the lake house, the one my grandmother had left to me in her will. This was strange because I hadn't heard them mention that property once in the last 3 years. I opened the envelope and found a reassessment notice, but it was addressed to someone I didn't recognize. I checked the name, then looked at the owner's name printed at the bottom of the tax record. It wasn't me. The house had been sold. My heart started pounding, not because I was shocked, they'd done worse things before, but because of the complete lack of communication. Not a word, not a heads up, no text message, No fake apology. They had just sold it without telling me. What made this even more serious was that my grandmother's will had included a restriction clause. The house couldn't be sold for 6 years unless I signed off in writing and filed a petition with the estate. That clause wasn't optional or negotiable. Somehow, they had bypassed it entirely. I took a photo of the document and carefully slipped it back into the pile where I'd found it. At dinner, I decided to bring it up casually. "Hey, what's going on with the lake house?" Both of my parents froze like deer in headlights. My mom tried to recover first. "Oh, that place. It was just too much to maintain, so we had to make a tough decision." When I asked when this happened, my dad looked down at his plate and mumbled, "About 9 months ago." 9 months. That meant they had sold the lake house a full 6 months before I even received that first fake update about Mom's condition. They had been sitting on this lie for nearly a year, just waiting for the right moment to distract me with something else. "Who made that decision?" I asked, staring straight at my dad. "Because that house was in my name." He didn't answer right away. He just started picking at his food like it was about to reveal some hidden truth. "That was a misunderstanding," he finally said. "You weren't around, and we figured it was best for the family." I leaned back in my chair. "So you forged my signature?" My mom gasped dramatically. "How can you say that to your father?" "Because unless I developed amnesia during one of my flights, I never signed over that deed," I replied. "And I sure as hell didn't authorize any sale." That's when Sophia walked through the front door. She looked genuinely surprised to see me sitting there. "Oh, you're here." I got up immediately and went straight to her. "You knew they sold the house." She smiled that infuriating smile of hers. "We all agreed it made sense. I'm launching my brand, and they needed help with expenses. What were we supposed to do, Marcus? Let it sit there empty so you can vacation there once a year?" That's when I saw red. "You're telling me that you used my inheritance, my grandmother's house, to fund your sketchpad hobby?" Her face twitched with irritation. "It's not a hobby. I'm building something meaningful." I turned back to my parents. "How much did you make from the sale?" They exchanged nervous glances but didn't answer. "How much of it is left?" I pressed. Still no answer. That silence told me everything I needed to know. I didn't blow up, I didn't scream, and I didn't flip the table like they probably expected me to. I just grabbed my jacket and said in the calmest voice I could manage, "You're going to hear from my lawyer." My dad tried to stand up. "Don't do this, we're family." I stopped in the doorway and turned back to look at all of them. "No, you're parasites, and I'm done feeding you." I left, got in the rental car, and drove straight back to the airport. I booked the next available flight home, and during the entire trip, I opened my email and started writing down everything that had happened while it was still fresh in my memory. The lake house sale, the Venmo receipts, the fake medical invoices, the forged signature, Sophia's Instagram posts showing her lavish lifestyle. All of it. Because this wasn't just theft anymore. This was systematic fraud, and I was going to make sure every single one of them paid for what they'd done. I landed back in Phoenix around 3:15 a.m., exhausted but wired with adrenaline at the same time. I'd spent the entire flight alternating between pure rage and cold, calculating focus. When I walked into my apartment, I didn't even bother taking off my shoes. I opened my laptop, created a folder labeled Family Theft, and dumped every screenshot, photo, and note I had collected into it. Then I just sat there staring at the screen. They had sold my lake house, my inheritance, without saying a word. They used that money to bankroll Sophia's fantasy artist lifestyle while simultaneously faking an illness to extract sympathy payments from me. But as it turned out, that wasn't even the end of it. I was about to discover that they had buried me in wreckage I didn't even know existed yet. 3 days later, I found out about the rest of their scheme in the most ridiculous way possible. I had gone online to update my travel rewards credit card information and noticed that my credit score had dropped nearly 80 points. This made absolutely no sense to me. I pay off everything in full every month, I don't carry balances, and I haven't missed a single payment since I was 22 years old. So I logged into my credit report to see what was going on. That's when I saw them. 2 new credit cards that I didn't recognize. Both opened approximately 6 months ago. Both were in my name. One had a balance of $2,500, and the other was completely maxed out at $17,000. I stared at the screen like it was some kind of sick joke. Then I looked closer at the details. One of the cards had multiple charges from a place called Artisan Collective, which I quickly realized was an artist co-op workspace in my hometown. That's where Sophia had posted her ribbon-cutting video, complete with a whole launch party, speeches, streamers, and everything. I remembered her standing in front of a poster that said, Sophia Grace Studios, where emotion meets vision. When I checked the timestamp on her Instagram video against the charge on my credit card, they matched down to the minute. She had basically documented her own crime and posted it for the world to see. You want to guess who had paid for that vision? Apparently it was me, without my knowledge or consent. I filed an identity theft claim that very night, locked down all my credit accounts, and froze the fraudulent cards. Then I called the police department in my hometown and filed a formal fraud report. The officer on the phone sounded almost amused when I explained the situation to him. "So your family took out credit cards in your name and used them to fund an art studio?" he asked. "That's exactly right," I confirmed. "And they used your social security number to do this?" "They must have. My dad still has all my old paperwork from when I lived at home." The officer paused for a moment. "Yeah, that'll do it. We'll start an investigation." Next, I called my friend Tyler, the former medical billing guy who had such a good nose for spotting shady accounting practices. I told him absolutely everything that had happened. He didn't say, "I told you so," but I could definitely hear the smirk in his voice when he responded. "Marcus, this isn't just a case of your family being dysfunctional," he said. "This is a full-on felony situation we're talking about here." "Good," I replied without hesitation. "I want to press charges. I want to go completely nuclear on this." And that's exactly what I did. I hired a real estate attorney first. Her name was Patricia, and she looked like the kind of lawyer who could end someone's career with a single glance. I sent her copies of the forged deed, my grandmother's original will, and the county tax reassessment showing the new owner's name. It turned out that the lake house had a non-transferable clause built directly into my grandmother's will. According to the legal language, the property wasn't allowed to be sold for 6 years without both my signature and a formal petition filed with the estate. My family had ignored both requirements completely. They had faked my signature and lied to the buyers. Some poor newlywed couple who had no idea they were purchasing stolen property. They had closed the sale under completely false pretenses. Patricia nodded as she flipped through all the paperwork I'd brought her. "Oh yeah, we can absolutely sue the estate representatives for this," she said confidently. "We're looking at fraud, breach of trust, and forged documents. And if they used your identity to take out loans, that's federal territory." I asked her how much legal trouble they were actually facing, and she smiled in a way that told me everything I needed to know. Let's find out. While Patricia worked on the civil angle of the case, I focused on handling the credit damage. I had to jump through absolute hell to prove that the credit card applications weren't mine. I had to send affidavits, get statements notarized, file police reports, and provide documentation for everything. But once the banks flagged everything as identity theft, they completely flipped their approach and started cooperating with the investigation. That's when the cracks in my family's scheme really started showing. The bank that had issued the $17,000 credit card emailed me a complete copy of the original application form. It had my name, my social security number, and my old email address from high school, an account that my dad still had access to from years ago. The application even listed my childhood home as the mailing address, and the IP logs showed that it had been submitted from their home Wi-Fi network. One of the banks attached a note to their correspondence. Account flagged for fraudulent access. Pattern consistent with known identity theft cases. When I looked at the signature on the application, it definitely wasn't mine. It was just a sloppy, obviously copied version that vaguely resembled something from an old lease I had signed years earlier. Meanwhile, I decided to keep tabs on what was happening with Sophia's precious art studio. It turned out that Artisan Collective was already in the process of filing an eviction notice against her for unpaid rent. She hadn't paid her studio dues in 3 months. So the $27,500 that had been charged to credit cards, opened in my name, had mostly gone toward furniture, mural painting, and her ridiculous brand package from some wannabe marketing guru who had charged $8,200 to design a logo that looked like something you'd find on Pinterest tattoos. I was angry, absolutely. But more than that, I felt completely numb. Numb at how casual and calculated it all was, like I was just an extra slot in their personal ATM machine. When I finally texted Sophia directly and asked if she had anything to say for herself, her response was exactly what I expected. "You've always had more than us. We just needed a little help catching up. It's not like you were using that house anyway." That was the exact moment I decided to burn it all down. No more conversations, no more warnings, no more guilt trips or family obligations. They had made the decision to treat my entire life like their backup funding source. Fine. Now they could see what happens when the ATM fights back. The weirdest thing about betrayal is how boring the paperwork actually is. You expect fireworks, screaming matches, dramatic confrontations where you storm into rooms and flip tables. But the reality is that most of revenge is just signing forms, sending emails, and double-checking dates on legal documents. And that's exactly what I spent the next few weeks doing, working quietly and methodically. My lawyer, Patricia, who was a probate and fraud specialist and looked like she chewed through lawsuits for breakfast, hit the ground running immediately. We filed a comprehensive civil suit to reverse the illegal sale of the lake house and named both of my parents as responsible parties. The charges included forgery, breach of fiduciary duty since my father was listed as the executor of my grandmother's estate, fraudulent conveyance, and unauthorized use of private identifying information. All of it was wrapped into one clean, brutal legal complaint. While Patricia filed the civil case, I continued building the criminal side of the case. The identity theft investigation had real traction now. The banks were being fully cooperative, especially after I handed them PDF copies showing the forged signature on the credit applications alongside verified samples from my apartment lease and other legitimate documents. I had even managed to recover access to that old email address my dad had been using, my high school account that I'd forgotten about. I found out he had set it to forward everything directly to himself. One of the investigators handling my case asked me a question that really made me think, why would your family think they could get away with all this? I didn't even have to consider my answer, because I've always let them get away with everything else. I was always the busy one, constantly flying somewhere for work, never home long enough to pay attention to details. They figured I was too distracted to notice a missing deed or a few $1,000s bleeding out of my accounts. They weren't just stealing from me. They were betting that I wouldn't care enough to stop them. They bet wrong. I also reached out to the couple who had unknowingly bought the lake house from my parents. Their names were Ben and Amanda. They were in their early 30s, newly married, and about to have their first child. When I explained the situation to them over the phone, they were absolutely devastated. Amanda actually started crying. "We used our entire life savings for that house," she said. Ben added, "The sale seemed completely legitimate. We had no idea there was anything wrong with it." I felt terrible for them because they weren't the enemy here. They were victims of my family's fraud just like I was. I forwarded them copies of my grandmother's will, the deed restriction documentation, and my lawyer's contact information. I told them that I wasn't going to fight them personally, but I was definitely going to fight the sale itself. If they wanted a way out of this legal mess, they should consider backing my case against my parents. They agreed immediately and enthusiastically. Their lawyer contacted Patricia, and we combined everything into a shared legal claim. I was suing to unwind the fraudulent sale, and Ben and Amanda were filing against my parents for misrepresentation and damages. The pressure from all these legal actions started to crack through my family's facade pretty quickly. Sophia went completely quiet on social media. No more flower sketches, no more dramatic captions about the pain of artistic creation. Her studio page just disappeared overnight. My mom tried calling me and left 4 voicemails in a row that became increasingly desperate. "Marcus, this is all going too far. You're going to ruin your father's health," she said in the first one. "We didn't mean to hurt you. We were just trying to keep the family afloat," was the second. But the third one really got to me. "You wouldn't even notice the lake house was gone if we hadn't told you." That last voicemail made me laugh out loud because they hadn't told me. I had found out completely by accident. That's what made this whole situation so much worse than just a desperate financial move. They had never planned to come clean about any of it. If I hadn't made that surprise visit, they would have carried on this charade forever, pretending they had never touched my inheritance while continuing to extract money from me through fake medical emergencies. Meanwhile, Patricia was preparing for the court hearing with military precision. "We have enough evidence to push this case very aggressively," she told me during one of our meetings. "I recommend we pursue full financial restitution, punitive damages, and petition the state bar to file criminal charges." "Do it," I said without hesitation. "And regarding the identity theft charges, are you planning to press those personally?" I paused and thought about it for a moment. I'd grown up with this ingrained belief that family was supposed to be off limits, that no matter what happened, you didn't turn your back on blood relatives. But the reality was that they had turned on me first. They had made that choice when they decided to forge my signature and steal my identity. "Yeah," I said finally. "I want them to have to explain all of this to a judge under oath." That week, I took a trip to my bank and opened a completely separate account dedicated solely to legal settlements. When the banker asked what the account was for, I told him, "Just preparing for something that's long overdue." At night, I found myself unable to sleep. But not because of stress or anxiety. My mind was racing because I was mentally replaying every memory, every ignored insult, every fake smile I'd received from my family over the years. I thought about Sophia handing me one of her amateur prints as a birthday gift while she was secretly cashing checks from my parents behind the scenes. I remembered the Christmas when I bought round-trip tickets to New York for all of them, took them to see a Broadway show and paid for the hotel and dinners, the whole 9 yards. They had spent that entire trip making fun of my job, joking that I was just a glorified PowerPoint guy. But Sophia, she posted a photo from Central Park with the caption, "Inspired by the city's energy, already sketching tonight," and my parents fawned over it like she had written the Declaration of Independence. So yeah, I decided to let the court sort it all out. Let them explain to a judge how they sold a house they didn't legally own. Let them squirm in front of a jury when those loan applications with my forged signature get read out loud. Let Sophia cry when her Instagram art empire collapses under the weight of fraud charges and unpaid studio bills. Because this wasn't just about the money anymore. This was about respect, about boundaries, about finally stopping the cycle of letting narcissists rewrite reality to suit their needs. And this time, they didn't get to control how the story ended. When the court date finally arrived, I discovered that real courtrooms don't look anything like what you see in movies. It's not loud and dramatic with objections flying every 12 seconds. It's quiet, cold, and honestly pretty boring. Until it's your own family sitting on the other side of the room trying to explain how they committed identity theft and sold a house they didn't legally own. My parents showed up dressed in matching outfits like they were heading to Easter brunch. My mom wore her pearls, and my dad had on the same blue blazer he used to wear when he would lecture me about responsibility as a teenager. Sophia didn't come at all. According to her affidavit, she was claiming emotional distress caused by the legal aggression from her brother. Right? I walked in with Patricia, who looked like she could end someone's career with a single glance. There was no small talk, no awkward family handshakes. We took our seats and got straight to business. First came the civil suit regarding the lake house. We opened with my grandmother's will, which was as clear as day. My dad was the executor of her estate, which meant he had a legal obligation to honor the conditions she had set forth, especially the part about the 6-year restriction on selling the property. Ignoring that restriction wasn't just a bad judgment call, it was a breach of fiduciary duty. The lake house had been left to me under the explicit condition that it could not be sold for at least 6 years, and only with my signature and written consent. The house had been sold after just 3 years, with no legitimate signature from me. Instead, there was a scanned, obviously forged signature attached to a rushed deed of sale that had been processed through a local title company. That title company, by the way, had also been named in a separate complaint for failing to verify ownership. My parents never had power of attorney, no legal right to make decisions about the property, and no estate petition filed. Just pure entitlement and a shaky attempt at forging my signature. The title company's due diligence had been essentially non-existent. They didn't flag the restriction clause in my grandmother's will. They didn't properly verify the actual owner. And when my forged signature hit their desk, they waved it through like it was a lunch receipt. When my dad took the stand, he claimed it was all just a misunderstanding. He said that I had verbally agreed to let the house go, that I had told him I didn't care what happened to it. He insisted it was too much to manage and that we thought he wouldn't mind. Patricia pulled out a printed log of all our text message conversations showing that I had never been notified about any sale. Then she slid the forged signature into evidence right next to a verified sample from my apartment lease. They didn't match at all, not even close. The judge raised an eyebrow and looked directly at my father. "So your explanation is that you assumed your son would be fine with selling his inherited property without informing him, and you coincidentally filed a deed with a signature that doesn't match any verified samples?" My dad looked like he was about to shrink into his chair and disappear. Then came the evidence about the credit cards. The bank representatives confirmed everything we had suspected. The applications had been filed from my parents' home IP address. The email used for verification was tied to my old high school account that my dad still had access to, and the signatures were obviously forged. When the prosecutor asked my dad why he had applied for credit cards under my name, he said something that literally stopped the entire courtroom. "He travels all the time, he's barely home. What's the harm in asking for a little help? What's the harm?" He actually said that out loud, in front of a judge. Like I was just a backup credit card he could use whenever he felt like it. Like my physical absence somehow canceled out my legal ownership of my own identity. The judge asked him if that help included maxing out credit cards to pay for his daughter's business expenses. That's when my mom jumped in with her own defense. Sophia needed that studio space to grow her art. It's not like Marcus was going to use the money anyway. Patricia leaned forward and asked in her most professional voice, "Are you stating under oath that your son's personal credit and inheritance were yours to reallocate as you saw fit because he travels for work?" My mom blinked several times before responding. "I'm saying we're a family. That's what it always came down to with them. We're a family," which was just their translation for, "You owe us everything, and we owe you nothing." The court didn't buy that logic for a second. The judge ruled in my favor on all counts. The lake house sale was declared completely void and invalid. My parents were ordered to repay the buyers every single dollar they had received, plus moving costs and damages for the inconvenience they had caused this innocent couple. The forged deed was officially labeled as fraudulent documentation. On top of all that, they were ordered to pay all legal fees and full restitution for the credit damage, which totaled over $105,000. A separate criminal referral was sent directly to the district attorney's office. The DA's office didn't commit to anything immediately, but the investigator handling my case told me privately that the evidence was more than sufficient for felony charges if they decided to pursue prosecution. My attorney said we would be notified if an indictment came down, but honestly, the civil victory felt like enough for me at that point. My parents looked absolutely shell-shocked when the verdict was read. Like this outcome wasn't supposed to happen. Like I was supposed to fold under pressure, roll over, and be the bigger person again, just like I always had in the past. Outside the courtroom, my dad tried one last time to talk to me. "Marcus, we didn't want it to come to this," he said. I stared at him for a long moment before responding. "You sold my house, ran up debt in my name, lied to my face for months, and acted like I should be grateful for the privilege. You chose this outcome." He opened his mouth to say something else, but I cut him off. "You made me the enemy the minute you decided I was just a safety net with a credit score." Then I turned around and walked away from them for what I knew would be the last time. I didn't bother going to the post-trial hearing. Patricia handled all of that for me and sent me a copy of the final judgment, neatly filed and officially stamped. It felt like more than just a legal win. It felt like genuine closure after years of being treated like a walking ATM. That night, I did something symbolic that felt incredibly satisfying. I took one of Sophia's old prints off my bookshelf, one she had given me years ago as a supposed gesture of sisterly love. It was a badly drawn deer with stars in its eyes and the words, "Vulnerability is power," scrawled across it in uneven handwriting. I lit it on fire in my kitchen sink and watched it curl up and disappear into ash. They had never once said they were proud of me. Not when I got promoted, not when I spoke at international conferences, not when I achieved any of the things I had worked so hard for. But a court judgment that officially states you were right the whole time? That speaks louder than any family hug ever could. I slept better that night than I had in years. Then, about 4 weeks after the ruling, I got a text from an unknown number. "Hope you're happy. Mom's having panic attacks now because of what you did." It was Sophia. Still playing the same manipulative games, still hiding behind fake sympathy and backhanded blame. She was acting like this was some petty family disagreement instead of what it actually was. Systematic fraud and identity theft. But I didn't ignore it this time. I called the number directly. She picked up, and her voice was dripping with venom wrapped in fake concern. "Wow, I didn't think you'd actually respond," she said. "I guess destroying your own family finally got boring for you." I unloaded on her completely. "No, I called because you still think this is about money. Like all I cared about was a house and a credit score. So let me make this crystal clear for you. What you and Mom and Dad did was about disrespect. Repeated, deliberate disrespect," I continued, not giving her a chance to interrupt. She tried to cut in with her usual weak defense, but I steamrolled right through her. "You didn't just steal from me. You tried to erase me. You treated me like a utility, not a brother, not a son. Just the guy you leech off of until he stops bleeding." She started with her predictable response. "We didn't know what else to do. Things were hard and Mom—" "Shut it," I said flatly. "You're not some misunderstood starving artist. You're a full-grown parasite in a thrift store halo. You threw a party with stolen money and gave a speech like you had built something meaningful. You didn't build anything, Sophia. You embezzled a fantasy." I could hear her breath catch, and I knew the rest of them were listening in the background. "You sat back while they forged my name. You watched them sell my house. You watched them take my identity and torch my credit score. And you were too busy filming your little ribbon-cutting ceremony to care about what it was costing me. And now you want to cry about the consequences?" I could hear rustling and whispering. And then my mom's voice came through the phone. Marcus, we didn't want to hurt you. We were trying to survive. You don't understand the pressure we were under. I actually laughed out loud at that. You think I don't know pressure? I've been supporting myself since I was 22, while you sat at home crying over Sophia's sad little flower doodles like they were prophetic art. You ignored my promotions, my achievements, my entire life, unless it came with a deposit attached. Then my dad's voice chimed in, cracked and desperate. You're tearing this family apart. Is that what you want? No, I snapped back. I wanted a family. Instead, I got leeches with matching excuses. You didn't just break my trust. You buried it, pissed on the grave, and then tried to invoice me for the funeral costs. Sophia whispered, You're being cruel. No, this is reality. And you don't get to watercolor over it with fake grief and artistic metaphors. Then I hit them with what I knew would be the final cut. You never once said you were proud of me. Not once. You paraded Sophia's flea market trash around like it was high art. But when I flew to Switzerland to speak at a global conference, you didn't even send a text message. You don't get to guilt me now. You lost that right the second you decided I was easier to steal from than support. I took a breath and delivered the final blow. You want to cry now? Good. Because this isn't a story where I come back for Christmas and we all hug it out and pretend this never happened. This ends with me walking away, and you learning what consequences feel like without a safety net to steal from. My mom's voice broke as she begged, Marcus, please stop. We're sorry, don't do this to us. Too late, I said. You already did it to yourselves. Click. I hung up and immediately blocked the number. By that point, the damage had already been done to them, not to me. The buyers of the lake house got their money back. I made sure of that. My lawyer helped them file their own lawsuit against my parents for breach of sale, misrepresentation, and emotional distress. That sweet couple now owns the lake house free and clear, paid for entirely by the people who tried to steal it from me. The title was voided and retransferred under court order, and my parents had to liquidate their 401k accounts to avoid wage garnishment. Meanwhile, Sophia's precious art studio was evicted. Her entire social media brand evaporated overnight. She posted one final Instagram story before shutting everything down. Sometimes the people closest to you are the ones who want to see you fail the most. Right, because apparently that's why she used my credit score to pay for pastel markers and a 7-foot print of her own face. Her car was repossessed about 3 months later. It turned out that the lease had also been co-signed using one of the credit cards that were tied to my stolen identity. When the banks came knocking for payment, there was nothing left to give them. She tried to post a GoFundMe campaign, claiming she was recovering from financial abuse by a toxic male relative. Tyler found the link and sent it to me with a sarcastic comment. The campaign raised exactly $97 before being reported and shut down for fraudulent claims. As for my parents, they ended up having to sell the house I grew up in to cover the court-ordered restitution. I found out later that they had moved in with my aunt, the same aunt they used to mock behind her back for not managing her money properly. She didn't want to take them in, but she was guilted into it by other family members who thought she should help during their time of crisis. After all of that legal and personal drama was finally settled, I went on with my life, and I actually started living it again. With the restitution money I received, I didn't buy a flashy car or an expensive house or some trophy to commemorate my victory. Instead, I opened a trust account that funds legal workshops for young adults who are dealing with financial abuse from family members. The first event I organized sold out within a week. I also made some major changes to my work situation. I started traveling less and switched roles within my company. I negotiated a new contract that allows me to be home much more often, which has been incredible for my mental health and overall quality of life. I built a new desk in my apartment. Not bought one, but actually built it myself with my own hands. I started painting too, but not like Sophia with brushes and canvas. I work with wood stain and functional art, creating things that serve a purpose rather than just existing to be admired. For the first time in a very long time, real peace finally showed up in my life. My decisions weren't being made through the lens of what will my family think or how can I keep the peace with them. Because I learned that real peace isn't about giving in to unreasonable demands or letting people walk all over you. Peace is having a locked door and no missed calls from people who only remember your phone number when they need something from you. Sometimes family stops being family the moment they start seeing your success as communal property and your personal boundaries as a betrayal of some imaginary family contract. The most liberating realization I've had through this entire experience is that blood doesn't automatically entitle people to access to your life, your money, or your forgiveness, especially when they've proven repeatedly that they see you as nothing more than a resource to be exploited. I sleep better now, I work more effectively, and I've built relationships with people who actually respect me as a person rather than viewing me as a walking bank account. The trust fund I established has already helped 12 different people navigate legal action against family members who were financially abusing them. That feels like a much better legacy than continuing to enable a family of manipulative fraudsters who never had any intention of changing their behavior. The lake house is back in my name where it belongs, and Ben and Amanda got to keep it as their family home. My credit score has completely recovered, and I've learned to set boundaries that actually mean something. Most importantly, I've learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for toxic people is to stop rescuing them from the consequences of their own choices.